You ever love someone so deeply, so absolutely, that you'd bet your life they could never lie to you?
I did.
For 15 years, I believed I knew everything there was to know about my wife. Her favorite songs, the way her voice cracked slightly when she was nervous, the names of her childhood pets, even the one time she swore she met a celebrity in line at a coffee shop. We shared everything. Until the morning I opened our back door and saw a line of uniformed officers setting up orange tape around my garden. That's when I realized I didn't know the woman I married at all. You're probably here because you saw the title and thought, what could be so bad that the police are literally digging up someone's backyard? And trust me, you're going to get that answer. I'm not going to string you along with clickbait. But to truly understand what they found and why my wife isn't the person I thought she was, you need to hear what led to that moment. Because the truth, it's not just about what was buried. It's about everything she buried in me too. Now, I know what you're thinking. Stories like these always seem too far-fetched, right? Something you'd expect in a Netflix docuseries, not a real person's life. But this isn't fiction. I'm telling you this because if I don't, I might actually go insane. And more importantly, because I think some of you might have seen things in your own relationships. Little red flags, strange silences, moments that didn't quite add up. Moments you pushed aside just like I did. Stick with me here. Because in the next few minutes, you're going to learn something I wish I had realized much earlier. Sometimes the most dangerous secrets aren't just hidden, they're planted. And when the truth finally grows roots, it can tear everything apart. This story's not just about marriage. It's about betrayal, identity, and the terrifying idea that the person sleeping next to you might not be who they say they are. So, if you're still watching, good. That tells me you're curious, maybe even nervous. Maybe you're someone who's been lied to. Maybe you've had that gut feeling, the one that tells you something's off, but you can't quite put your finger on it. I had that feeling for years. I ignored it until it was too late. Let me take you back. Just a few months ago, life seemed ordinary. We were the perfect couple on the outside, suburban home, 2 kids, matching lawn chairs. But something was changing in her. She was different. Not in a dramatic, movie-style way.
No.
It was subtle. She started locking her phone, started walking out to take calls she never used to get. And one night, while I was taking out the trash, I caught her staring at the backyard. Just staring. Like she was watching something invisible move beneath the ground. I didn't ask her about it right away. Part of me didn't want to know. Denial is a funny thing, it protects you, but only until it shatters. I remember lying in bed that night, watching her sleep and thinking, what are you hiding from me? That's when the real paranoia started. I looked through old documents, photos, anything I could find. But the truth didn't live in paper. It lived in dirt. And then came the knock. Early morning. Cold coffee still in my hand. 2 detectives. Calm, polite, firm. They asked for her by name. Said there had been a tip. That they needed to inspect the backyard. No explanation. No details. Just a thin line of silence between us, like a fuse waiting to spark. She didn't even look surprised. That's what chilled me the most. Before I go deeper, let me ask you this. How well do you really know the people in your life? Your partner, your friends, even your parents? Because what I've learned is that sometimes the person closest to you is actually a stranger in disguise. And when you start digging, literally or emotionally, you might find things you were never supposed to see. This isn't just a story about a crime. It's a psychological unraveling. The mind games, the careful lies, the masks she wore so effortlessly. You see, the signs were always there, but I was too blind, or maybe too in love, to see them. Looking back, I remember one night she asked me if I believed people could completely reinvent themselves. I laughed it off at the time. Now I understand, she wasn't talking hypothetically. She was confessing. As the officers cordoned off the backyard, neighbors began to gather. Whispers, curious glances. One woman across the street actually brought out popcorn, like it was some midday entertainment. I stood there frozen, watching strangers walk across my lawn, knowing that every step they took was closer to the truth I never wanted to hear. The lead detective, a quiet man with sad eyes, pulled me aside and said they'd received a credible report that something might be buried back there. something connected to an unsolved case. When I asked what kind of case, he only said, "It's better if you prepare yourself." That's when I realized this wasn't about property lines or permits. This was about her past. And here's where it gets even darker. After they started digging, my wife disappeared.
Just like that.
Vanished. No note. No phone call. No trace. One moment, she was sitting on our porch swing pretending to read. The next, she was gone. Her purse was still inside. Her car parked in the garage. It was like she melted into the very shadows of the house. I don't want to spoil what they eventually found. Not yet. But I will tell you this. It changed everything. Not just how I saw her, but how I saw myself. I had been living in a beautifully constructed lie. A dream built on top of something rotting beneath the surface. And the scariest part? I think she loved me. I think in some twisted way, she wanted to protect me from it. YouTube is filled with videos about betrayal, crime, true stories, secrets that come to light. But this one is personal. I'm not an actor. I'm not exaggerating. I'm just a man trying to make sense of the life he thought he understood, and the woman he thought he knew. This video will give you answers. Not just about what happened in our backyard, but how someone can create an entire life around a lie and still make you feel safe inside it. If you've made it this far, thank you. That tells me you're not just watching for entertainment, you're invested. And you should be. Because this isn't just about my wife's secret. It's about how easily we let people rewrite their own pasts, how quickly we ignore warning signs, and how dangerous silence can be. What the police uncovered back there, it wasn't just physical. It was symbolic. It was the breaking open of everything I thought was real. And when I tell you what they found, when I show you the evidence, you're going to ask the same question I did. Who the hell did I marry? But to understand the full truth, you need to see what happened next. Because after the first few layers of soil were pulled back, what they saw didn't make sense. It wasn't what they expected. It was worse. Much worse. And the clue that broke the case wide open? It wasn't buried at all. It was sitting right there in plain sight. I didn't sleep the night the police came. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her standing in the middle of the yard again. Barefoot, unmoving, hands clenched so tight her knuckles had turned white. That's the image that keeps playing in my mind, even now. I try to remember if she said anything that morning, if there was even the slightest warning in her expression.
But no.
Just silence. Like she knew everything was finally collapsing and there was nothing left to say. And the more I think about it, the more I realize that this didn't start with a knock on the door. It started weeks before, maybe even years. I just didn't know what I was looking at until it was too late. The first strange thing was the package. No return address, no name, just a small, weathered box that showed up on our porch one morning. She opened it while I was making breakfast. I saw her face change, like the air had been knocked out of her. But when I asked what was inside, she laughed and said it was nothing. Just junk, she told me, waving it off. Some mix-up, probably. She threw it in the trash without letting me see it. Later that day, I went outside and tried to find it, but the garbage had already been picked up. That night, she barely spoke to me. She sat with her knees pulled to her chest, staring at the TV without seeing it, flinching every time her phone buzzed. Looking back, that box was the moment her mask started to slip, and I didn't even realize it. I started noticing more after that. Calls from numbers she wouldn't answer in front of me. Deleted messages. Once, I caught her searching for something on her laptop, an old address that didn't mean anything to me at the time. She slammed the screen shut when I walked in and snapped at me for hovering. That wasn't like her. We never had secrets. At least, that's what I thought. But the biggest shift came when we went to her hometown for her cousin's wedding. She hadn't been back in over a decade, and when we drove past a rundown motel just outside of town, she went pale. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel, and she refused to look at it. I asked her what was wrong, and she said, "I stayed there once. It wasn't a good memory." She wouldn't elaborate. I didn't push her. That was my mistake. There were other signs, too. Our neighbor, Mr. Kessler, retired, nosy, always outside trimming his hedges, once told me he'd seen her out in the yard at 3 a.m., just pacing. No phone, no flashlight. Just walking in circles near the garden bed like she was waiting for something. When I asked her about it, she brushed it off with a laugh and said she couldn't sleep. Said the moonlight helped her think. But that's the thing, there wasn't any moonlight that night. It was cloudy, overcast. I checked. Little details like that began to add up, but at the time, I didn't know what they were pointing to. I thought maybe she was having a breakdown. I even considered setting up a therapy appointment for her, but I didn't want to offend her. I convinced myself it would pass. That she just needed time. Then there was her friend Kara. At first, I didn't think much of her sudden reappearance in our lives. They were college roommates, close once, but they hadn't spoken in years. Out of nowhere, Kara came to visit for a long weekend and stayed in our guest room. She was friendly, too friendly. Kept asking strange questions about our house, how long we'd lived there, how deep our septic tank ran. I remember thinking it was an odd thing to ask, but I let it slide. Kara spent most of the weekend clinging to my wife like they were trying to squeeze in a lifetime's worth of conversations in just a few days. And then she left as suddenly as she arrived. No goodbye. No message. Just gone. And yet, just a few days after Kara's visit, the cops showed up. That timing still haunts me. Did Kara tell them something? Was she trying to protect me, or protect my wife? Or was she involved in something darker? I don't know. But I do know that not everything she said during her stay made sense. One night, she got drunk and told me, "People can start over, you know. They can become someone new if they bury their past deep enough." At the time, I thought she was just being philosophical. Now I wonder if she was warning me. Another piece of the puzzle came from our son. He's 8, curious, smart, always asking questions. One evening, he told me he saw Mommy burying something near the old willow tree. I laughed it off, assuming he just caught her planting bulbs or hiding a time capsule like we'd done once for fun. But now I can't stop thinking about it. Because when the police started digging, that's where they began, right by the base of that tree. And whatever they were looking for, they believed it was there long before we moved in. Which means my wife returned to that spot. She didn't just move on from her past. She circled back to it. What really eats at me is that I never saw her afraid. Never once. She was always calm, collected, even when chaos swirled around her. And that makes me wonder, what kind of person doesn't panic when the cops show up to excavate their backyard? What kind of person doesn't fight, doesn't run, doesn't even ask why? Unless they already know. Unless they've been waiting for that day all along. As for potential suspects, honestly, at this point, I don't know who I should be suspicious of. Kara, definitely. She knew something. She acted like someone carrying guilt, but I can't tell if she was the accomplice or the whistleblower. Mr. Kessler? Maybe he's more than the lonely old man he pretends to be. He watches everything from his porch. What if he saw something years ago and decided now was the time to speak up? Or maybe it wasn't either of them. Maybe it was someone from her past finally coming back to finish what they started. Maybe someone sent that package. Maybe the person she's been hiding from finally caught up with her. And let's not forget the biggest red herring of all, me. I know how this looks. A missing wife. A secretive past. A husband narrating the whole thing like a thriller novel. But I didn't do anything wrong. At least, I don't think I did. Then again, I didn't know what she was capable of. So, who's to say what I missed? Or what she was protecting me from? The truth is, I'm starting to doubt everything. Every photo, every conversation, every memory we shared. Was she really happy all those years? Or was it just a long con? A performance? If I go back through our photos, will I see something I missed? Some shadow behind her eyes? Some clue hiding in plain sight? And if she loved me, truly loved me, why didn't she tell me the truth before it all exploded? Right now, the only thing I know for sure is this. The more the police dig, the closer they're getting to something big. And not just bones or evidence. Something that's going to change how everyone sees her. Something that may destroy whatever's left of the life we built together. And the worst part? I think she wanted it this way. She vanished not because she was running, but because she was done hiding. And the question that keeps me awake every night isn't what they'll find out there. It's who they'll find connected to it. Because what if the person they're really investigating isn't her? What if it's me? The first real obstacle came just as things were starting to make sense, or, at least, feel like they might. It was about 3 days after the initial police search began. They had set up temporary fencing around the backyard, brought in ground-penetrating radar equipment, even assigned 2 patrol cars to watch the property overnight. I was kept mostly on the outside, watching everything unfold from the kitchen window like a bystander in my own life. Then suddenly, on the morning of the 4th day, they halted the dig. No explanation. No updates. Just packed up, rolled up their yellow tape, and left. When I called the lead detective, Detective Rowley, the one who had told me to prepare myself, his phone went straight to voicemail. And just like that, the investigation stopped as quickly as it had started. No answers. No evidence. No closure. At first, I thought maybe they found something they didn't want to discuss right away. Maybe it had to go through forensic testing. But then the official reason trickled down through a secondary officer, a young guy with a nervous smile who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. He told me they'd received new information suggesting the tip might have been a hoax. Just like that, all their momentum, all their urgency, vanished. It didn't make sense. You don't bring in that kind of heavy equipment and overnight surveillance for a prank.
Someone had gotten to them.
Or something had changed behind the scenes. That's when I realized someone didn't want the truth to come out. Later that night, I went out to the backyard myself. I stood by the shallow trench they'd left behind near the willow tree. The air smelled like disturbed earth and something older, metallic, almost sour. I don't know what I expected to find. Maybe a scrap of something they'd overlooked, something they missed in their rush to shut things down. But instead, I found a set of fresh boot prints leading from the fence to the back porch. They didn't belong to any of the officers I'd seen. These prints were narrow, deep, deliberate. Someone had been there after the police left. Someone who didn't want to be seen. The next morning, I received an envelope in the mailbox. No postage. No return address. Just my name written in black marker across the front. Inside was a single Polaroid. Old, faded, grainy. It showed my wife, unmistakably younger, standing next to a man I didn't recognize. They were in front of a building that looked vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place it. On the back of the photo, written in shaky block letters, were the words, "Leave it buried." My hand shook. I scanned every inch of the photo, looking for some clue, some timestamp. Her smile looked forced. The man's arm was draped around her shoulders, but her body leaned ever so slightly away from him. There was something in her eyes, something I hadn't seen before. Not fear exactly, but resignation. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't focus on work. I stopped sleeping altogether. I started combing through old files, digging up anything I could find, tax records, medical files, yearbooks, wedding photos. I even started messaging people from her past, anyone I could remember her talking about. Most of them didn't reply. A few sent polite responses, saying they hadn't spoken to her in years. But one, her old college friend, Becca, called me in the middle of the night. Her voice trembled through the phone. She told me if anything ever happened, if someone started asking questions, I should tell them to stop. Please, I know you want answers, but you don't want this kind of truth. Before I could respond, she hung up. I haven't been able to reach her since. It was around this time that I started having the dreams. In them, I'm in the backyard, digging with my bare hands, and I find a wooden box. Inside is a set of letters, all addressed to me, but written in someone else's handwriting. In every dream, I open the first letter and it just says, "I'm sorry," then I wake up. Every time. Same words. Same feeling of unfinished business lodged in my chest like a stone. Then came the fire. Just 2 nights after Becca's call, my shed burned to the ground. No storm. No lightning. Just flames, sudden, loud, violent. The fire department came quickly, but it was a total loss. The shed held boxes of our old things, tools, camping gear, seasonal decorations, and a few of her storage bins from before we were married. They said it was likely electrical, but I know that's not true. The power to the shed had been disconnected for months. Someone set that fire. Someone wanted something in those bins gone forever. That was when I stopped trusting the narrative. All this time, I'd assumed I was on the outside of the secret, an unwilling bystander. But what if this wasn't about me finding the truth? What if I was a part of it without even knowing? Because as I looked through the insurance records, I noticed something odd. My wife had taken out an additional rider on our homeowner's policy just 3 months ago. A rider that included the shed and detached property structures. I never knew about it. She never told me. That means she knew the shed was important. That means she knew it would be targeted. And then there's Detective Rowley. When I finally reached him again, his tone was different, curt, cold, like he was reading from a script. He told me I should consider moving on and let the process play out. But the way he said it, with no warmth, no interest, made it sound less like advice and more like a threat. That's when it hit me. He wasn't just being dismissive. He was being careful, controlled. Like he was trying to keep me quiet without making it obvious. I started to think maybe I was looking in the wrong places. So I went back to the photo, back to the building behind them. It took hours, but I finally found a match, an old juvenile center on the outskirts of Minnesota. Long shut down, abandoned after a scandal involving a missing teenager. A missing girl who was never found. And my wife? She used to live in Minnesota for a year as a teenager. A year she always glossed over, said it was just a phase. What if she wasn't just a witness to something? What if she was the missing girl, under a different name? What if everything I thought I knew about her life after that year was built on a lie? But I can't prove it. The center's records are sealed, and when I tried contacting someone who used to work there, I got a voicemail saying the number had been disconnected. Even reached out to a true crime podcaster who'd done a series on the place. He told me off the record that he'd been warned to leave that case alone, that it was too connected. When I asked what he meant by connected, he went silent, then hung up.
And now?
Now I'm being followed. I saw the same car parked outside my house 3 nights in a row. Dark SUV, tinted windows, out-of-state plates. The moment I stepped out to confront them, they drove off.
I don't know who's watching me.
I don't know who's trying to stop me. But someone somewhere doesn't want this story told. Just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, I received a text. An unknown number. No message. Just a photo. It was me, standing in the backyard, taken from inside the house. But I was home alone. So the real question is no longer, what was my wife hiding? It's who else was she hiding it with? And the worst part? I think they're still here. The photo sent to my phone, that single, silent image of me standing in my own backyard, taken from inside the house, I thought I was alone and shifted everything. It felt like the final confirmation that I wasn't dealing with something from the past anymore. This wasn't about uncovering what had happened. This was about what was still happening right now around me, maybe even inside these walls. I didn't sleep that night. I kept the lights on in every room and moved between them constantly, checking locks, blinds, corners. I even left the TV running not because I was watching it, but because the sound made the silence feel less oppressive. It was no longer just about finding out who my wife really was. Now it was about survival, mine and possibly someone else's too. That someone else turned out to be my sister, Angela. She lives a few towns over, single mom, works as a nurse, fiercely protective of me since we were kids. We've always been close, though I hadn't told her everything. I didn't want to drag her into this mess, didn't want her worrying about something she couldn't fix. But I didn't have a choice anymore. Because 2 days after I received the photo, she called me in tears. She'd come home from work to find her apartment door cracked open, not broken, just slightly ajar. Inside, nothing had been taken, nothing obviously disturbed. Except on her kitchen counter, someone had left a manila envelope. No name, no return address. Just a single word scrawled in red ink across the front. Quiet. Inside the envelope was another Polaroid. But this time it wasn't of me, it was of her. Angela, standing in the hospital parking lot, talking to a coworker. The photo had been taken from just a few feet away, close enough to make out the print on her name badge. She didn't recognize the angle, didn't remember anyone standing nearby that day. But whoever took it had been close, too close. The message was clear. Stop digging, or we'll start watching everyone you love. That broke me in a way the backyard, the fire, the missing wife hadn't. Because now this wasn't just some twisted puzzle about my marriage. This was a web, stretching out, touching people I never imagined were involved. It forced me to go back, mentally retrace everything. Who knew what? Who had access to what? Who had a reason to keep the past buried? And that's when something strange clicked into place. Angela had only met my wife a handful of times, always at family holidays, always polite but distant. But now I remembered something. At our wedding, Angela had asked me afterward if I thought my wife was too calm. I'd laughed at her, brushed it off as nerves. But she insisted something about her smile didn't feel real, like she was performing. Angela had always been intuitive, but I dismissed it. Now I wondered if she'd seen something I hadn't, right from the beginning. I started piecing together what I could, and that's when I discovered something deeply unsettling. While checking through some old files on our shared computer's hard drive, the one we barely used anymore, I stumbled across a hidden folder. It was buried so deep in the system directory, it might have been there for years. Inside were video files, dozens of them. Mostly home footage, but not the kind we ever took. These weren't celebrations or family trips. These were recordings from inside the house, from a mounted camera I didn't know existed. Angles that showed our living room, our kitchen, even our bedroom. Some were dated years ago. Some were just days old. I watched one. Just one. It showed me sitting on the couch, reading a book. My wife walked in, looked at me for a long moment, then walked back out without saying a word. The footage was grainy, the sound faint, but I could hear her humming, just barely, a tune I didn't recognize. She knew the camera was there. She was performing for it. The realization chilled me to the bone. Who was she recording this for? And why was I being observed for years without ever noticing? The bigger question, though, came from one file dated 8 months before the investigation started. It was labeled redhouse_audio_transcript. It wasn't a video file, but an audio clip, about 2 minutes long. It sounded like a conversation, muffled and distorted, but one voice was unmistakably hers. The other? Male, older, angry. He kept saying the same phrase over and over again. Asterisk, you promised. You said it would never come back. Asterisk, her voice, quieter, more controlled, responded with, asterisk, it wasn't supposed to. But now he's asking questions. Asterisk, I sat frozen, listening to that sentence on repeat. Now he's asking questions. That he was me. The Red House. That name stuck with me. I started digging, found a reference in one of the real estate files from when we bought our home. The previous owner had an LLC, Red House Holdings. It wasn't just a property group. It was a shell company tied to a list of abandoned homes across the Midwest. One of those homes matched the building in the first Polaroid. Someone had been using it to hide identities, shuffle pasts, bury things no one wanted found. And my wife. She wasn't just someone who benefited from it. She might have helped build it. But that's not even the worst part. Just when I thought I was circling the final layers of this mystery, the story shifted again. My neighbor, Mr. Kessler, the one who had seen her out pacing the yard, was taken to the hospital after a fall. I went to visit him, more out of guilt than anything else. I hadn't spoken to him since the investigation stopped. But when I walked into the room, he looked at me with something different in his eyes. Not confusion, not surprise,
But sorrow.
He didn't ask how I was. Didn't mention the fire or the police. He just said, I tried to warn her. Years ago. But she said it was too late. I pressed him. Asked what he meant. But he was tired, drifting in and out of lucidity. Before I left, he whispered something I'll never forget. Asterisk, they're not looking in the right place. It's not the backyard. It never was. Asterisk. That sentence shattered everything I thought I understood. Because if it wasn't the backyard, then where had she really buried the truth? And more importantly, what if she never meant for it to be found? I used to think paranoia was just a symptom of guilt or fear, something that lived in people who had something to hide. But now I understand. It's what happens when your reality starts to fracture, when you feel eyes on you but can't see where they're coming from, when the rhythm of your life slips out of sync and nothing feels safe anymore, not even your own mind. That's where I was the night Angela disappeared. I remember the call so clearly, even though I wish I didn't. It was her babysitter, frantic, breathless, saying Angela had never returned from her shift and wasn't answering her phone. Her son was still at the sitter's apartment, waiting, confused. Her car was found in the hospital parking lot, keys still in the ignition, her purse sitting in the passenger seat. No signs of a struggle. No trace of where she'd gone. I knew instantly that it wasn't random. Angela wouldn't abandon her son. Not for a second. She was the most responsible person I knew. If something had happened to her, it was because of me, because I kept pushing, kept asking questions, kept pulling at threads I didn't understand. The guilt hit like a wave, but right behind it came something worse. Terror. This wasn't about uncovering a buried secret anymore. Someone was trying to erase the people around me.
Slowly.
Methodically. I couldn't help but think of the envelope left in her kitchen, the word quiet scrawled across it like a final warning. And I hadn't listened. I kept digging. I didn't stop. And now she was gone. I drove out to her place that night, needing to see it for myself. The babysitter had already handed her son over to her mother, who didn't want to speak to me. I didn't blame her. When I pulled into the parking lot, I saw the police had already taped off her car. But they weren't acting with urgency. They were calm, businesslike. Like they'd seen this kind of thing before, and already knew the script. I tried to ask questions, try to get them to acknowledge the connection to my case, to my wife, to the threats, but they brushed me off. Said there wasn't evidence of foul play yet. That she was just missing. That maybe she needed space.
Space.
As if that's what this was. As if Angela, who had never once gone radio silent in her entire life, had just decided to vanish in the middle of her shift. I drove home with my chest caving in, gripping the steering wheel so tightly, I thought it would snap. I knew I had to do something, but I didn't know where to start. I was completely alone now, and it felt like the walls around me were breathing, watching, waiting for me to crack. That night, it escalated. It started with a noise, barely audible, like a soft creak, coming from the hallway outside my bedroom. I froze. I hadn't slept more than an hour the night before, and I thought maybe it was my exhaustion playing tricks on me. But then I heard it again, closer this time. I reached for the bat I kept by the bed, the same one I used to joke about needing in case of burglars, back when life still had room for jokes. I crept to the hallway, every hair on my arm standing up. The lights were off. I hadn't turned them off. The switch didn't work. The power had been cut, or maybe just to that part of the house. I don't know. I stood in the dark, listening. That's when I heard a whisper. Not words, just breath. It came from the living room. I edged toward it, holding the bat tighter, heart pounding so loud I thought it would drown out everything else. But when I turned the corner, no one was there. Nothing out of place. No sign of entry. I flicked the lights, they came on. Everything was back to normal. Too normal. But on the coffee table sat my wife's wedding ring. Not a replica. Not one that had fallen behind a dresser. It was the real one. The one she always wore. The one she hadn't taken off since our wedding day. The one that was not there when she vanished. I picked it up slowly, like it might detonate in my hand. My breath caught. It was warm, like someone had just been holding it. I checked every lock in the house, every window, every camera, nothing. The footage on the doorbell cam had been wiped.
Completely.
Not a single frame from the past 12 hours. Whoever had done this knew what they were doing. The next day, I found a note wedged into my mailbox. Plain white paper, folded twice, no envelope. Just one sentence typed in blocky, bold letters. Asterisk, you're not investigating a person. You're uncovering a program. Asterisk, that word, program, hit like a punch. I had been thinking too small. Thinking about my wife's secrets, her past, what she might have done or seen or been part of. But what if she wasn't acting alone? What if she wasn't even the one in control? I started digging again, this time in a different direction. I remembered a file folder my wife kept in her desk, one she told me was just for taxes. But when I found it, Buried beneath receipts and old utility bills, I uncovered something else. A brochure, aged, yellowed, partially torn, for a behavioral rehabilitation center that had been shut down decades ago. The name was familiar, Pine Lake Institute. I recognized it because it had been mentioned briefly in a Reddit thread I came across when researching the Red House. Pine Lake had been tied to a cluster of disappearances in the early 2000s, including several underage girls. There were rumors of experimentation, reprogramming, even identity reassignments for witnesses under protection, or worse, people who needed to be erased. At first, the authorities had denied the center even existed. Then they claimed it was closed due to infrastructure issues. But whispers online told a different story. And now I was holding proof that my wife had some connection to it. Her name wasn't anywhere on the brochure, but someone had circled a phone number on the back. The ink was faded, but legible. I tried calling it. It rang once, then went dead. When I called again, the number no longer existed. My mind was unraveling by the minute. I couldn't separate what was real from what was planted anymore. I started wondering if she had ever truly loved me, or if that too had been part of the performance. Maybe the entire marriage was staged. A life constructed to keep something hidden. But why me? Why this house?
Why now?
As I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, holding her wedding ring and staring at the empty space she used to sleep in, I felt it, an overwhelming sense that someone was watching me. Not through the windows, not from the street, but from within. A presence that felt familiar, heavy, intentional, like whatever was happening wasn't just continuing.
It was accelerating.
And then the landline rang. I hadn't heard it in years. We never used it. Almost forgot it was plugged in. I let it ring once, twice, then picked up slowly. No one spoke. I waited, about to hang up, when I heard it. A voice, calm, measured, female. Asterisk, you were never meant to find out. She loved you anyway. That's what broke protocol. Asterisk. Then the line went dead. That was the moment I understood. This wasn't a mystery I had stumbled into. This was a machine I had disrupted. And now it was recalibrating. I didn't expect the break to come from a stranger. Not after everything I'd been through. Not after the silence from the police, the disappearances, the threats. But sometimes, it's the things you've stopped paying attention to that come back around and flip everything upside down. It was late, almost midnight, when my doorbell rang. I froze. Nobody just shows up at that hour, not unless something's wrong. I checked the porch camera, static. Again. Useless. When I opened the door, there was a man standing there, maybe mid-40s, disheveled, clutching a large envelope like it was the only thing keeping him together. His voice was hoarse when he spoke, like he hadn't talked to anyone in a long time. "You don't know me," he said, "but I knew your wife. I knew her before any of this." I didn't say anything. I just stepped aside and let him in. Something about his eyes, wary, exhausted, like a man who had been running for years, told me he wasn't lying. He sat at the edge of the couch, trembling slightly, and placed the envelope on the coffee table between us. "Before she was your wife," he said quietly, "she was my sister." That single sentence shattered the air around us like glass. My chest seized up. I asked his name, Daniel. Daniel Browning. I'd never heard of him. Never once had she mentioned having a brother. He nodded slowly, like he expected that. "She changed everything after what happened. New name, new story, new life. But I never stopped looking. Until she found me first and begged me to leave it alone." He looked down, swallowing hard. "I didn't listen. And now I think I've put you in more danger than either of us realized." He opened the envelope and pulled out a set of documents, birth certificates, juvenile records, intake forms from something called the Whitmore Behavioral Trust, and, most horrifying of all, copies of old court testimony from a closed-door juvenile trial that had been sealed by federal order. It was all there in black and white. Her name, her real name, was Emily Browning. She had been a minor witness in a sweeping federal case involving a shadow program that allegedly used teenagers in experimental witness protection operations, programs that blurred the line between safety and manipulation, between saving lives and rewriting them entirely.
She had testified against them. Or, at least, she tried to.
But the program was buried before the case could be fully prosecuted. Everything was swept under, sealed, renamed. And every trace of her, Emily, was erased. Except the people running that program didn't all go away.
Some just went underground.
Some rebranded. Some adapted. And here's where the twist truly began. Daniel leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. She wasn't afraid of being exposed. She was afraid you'd be taken. My stomach dropped. Why me? I asked. What do I have to do with any of this? He looked at me like he was about to tell me something he'd hoped he'd never have to say. Because the program didn't just erase kids like her. It placed them too. Reinserted them into society as tests. Some of those kids were sent to foster homes. Some to fabricated identities. And some, like you, he hesitated. You were adopted at age 5, right? No memory of what came before. I stared at him, everything inside me collapsing in on itself. What if I told you you were part of it too? Everything started flashing in front of me, my spotty early childhood memories, the fact that I never saw photos of myself before kindergarten, my adoptive parents' strange, tight-lipped attitude about how I came to them. It all felt like a weird puzzle I'd never really tried to solve because I assumed the pieces weren't important. But now I realized maybe I hadn't been just stumbling into a mystery. Maybe I was already inside it, and just didn't know. Daniel handed me a second envelope. Inside were surveillance photos years old of me, playing soccer as a teen, walking to high school, holding hands with my wife on our second date. I hadn't been watching her. They'd been watching us both. He explained what he'd pieced together over the years. The program, called Whitmore, had been trying to study long-term behavior reformation to see if identities could be permanently rewritten. They paired certain individuals who were part of the system to monitor attachment, emotional resilience, trauma resuppression. My wife, Emily, had tried to escape, but she never really left it behind. And somehow, they had paired her with me, whether by design or some twisted coincidence. That's why she burned the shed. That's why she buried things in the yard. She wasn't hiding a body. She was hiding proof. Proof that the program existed. That we were both part of it. That everything we thought we had chosen was orchestrated from the beginning. Then Daniel said something that knocked the air out of my lungs. She didn't run away because she was scared. She ran because she finally realized the experiment wasn't over. I didn't want to believe it. I still don't. But the evidence is there. The fire, the missing camera footage, the vanished files, Angela's disappearance. It's all too connected. And now, the real question isn't just what the program was doing, it's who's still running it, and why, because if Daniel is right, I wasn't just part of a forgotten experiment. I'm still in it. And the people pulling the strings? They're not done with me yet. The air outside was stifling, thick with July heat and the electric hum of tension. I watched from the edge of the excavation site as the sheriff's team hauled away one more sealed container from beneath our garden, the one my wife had spent years nurturing like it was sacred. The moment they cracked it open, the scent of rot poured out like a secret long buried. But it wasn't until I saw what was inside, the charred remains of something unidentifiable, wrapped in a tarp with our old address scrawled across it, that the full weight of what I'd ignored for years slammed into me like a freight train. And that's when she appeared.
Calm. Too calm.
My wife stepped through the back door like she was walking into a Sunday brunch, not the climax of her life unraveling. I didn't even notice the way the sheriff's deputy reached for his holster when she smiled. "Whatever they're telling you, it's not true," she said, her voice steady, almost maternal. "They're looking for a villain that doesn't exist." But the lies no longer worked on me. Not after the emails I found last night, hidden in a locked folder on our old home server, cloaked in a digital archive she thought I'd never check. They weren't just love letters. They were confessions, sent to a man who disappeared a decade ago, the same man whose name was scrawled on the medical bracelet found inside that box of bones. And then it hit me. She hadn't buried a stranger. She'd buried her past. I turned to face her, holding out the final piece of evidence, a torn photograph, once burned and now partially restored by a digital recovery specialist. It showed her with the man, standing beside what looked like a makeshift grave. Her hand was on the shovel. His face was bruised. And she wasn't afraid. She was smiling. "I trusted you," I said, my voice cracking not with weakness, but with rage. "I built a life with you. And all this time, you were just waiting for it to collapse." She didn't flinch. "I never planned for any of this," she whispered, her mask finally slipping. "He came back. He threatened everything, our son, our future. I did what I had to do." That's when the real twist dropped, not from her, but from the sheriff himself. He pulled me aside, lowering his voice, glancing at her with the wary expression of someone who'd just seen through the final layer of someone's disguise. "She didn't act alone," he said. "There's another name. Someone who wired her money after the disappearance. Someone who signed the permit that allowed this house to be built, exactly on top of that grave." Confused, I took the file he handed me and flipped through the pages. My vision blurred as I saw the signature. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't some faceless investor or criminal accomplice. It was my father's. The ground beneath me tilted. My father, who'd helped us buy this property, who insisted we build our life here, who had always treated my wife like family before she even was. My father, who died last year, his secrets going with him to the grave. He hadn't just known. He had been part of it. A cover-up. A legacy of manipulation passed down without a word. As the deputies cuffed my wife, she turned to me one last time. Not pleading, not crying, but smiling again. "You always thought I was the liar," she said. "But you never asked yourself who taught me how." In that moment, the story shattered. It was never just about her. It was never just about a hidden body in the backyard. It was about the generational darkness that had quietly shaped every corner of our lives. The lies didn't begin with her. They were inherited. And as the media vans pulled in, flooding the neighborhood with reporters hungry for the next true crime viral twist, I realized the nightmare wasn't over. It was only beginning. Because now, I had to decide what truths to tell my son, and which ones to keep buried. It's been 7 months since the last shovel pierced the soil of our backyard, and I still wake up some nights convinced I can hear the distant hum of excavation machinery grinding through the earth. The lawn has regrown, though patchy, as if the land itself is hesitant to fully heal. My son is back in school, quieter now, more observant than a kid his age should be. Sometimes I catch him staring out the window at the garden where it all unraveled, his gaze fixed and thoughtful, like he's trying to solve a puzzle with pieces still buried in his mind. The media frenzy has died down, mostly. The story had its viral moment. The police excavation video racked up millions of views on YouTube, clickbait thumbnails reading, **** wife's shocking backyard secret ****, and **** truth found beneath the garden ****. But the silence that followed is louder than any headline. My wife is awaiting trial. Her legal team mounted a defense of emotional duress, claiming years of manipulation and coercion, even invoking my father's involvement as justification. It worked well enough to complicate things. The court date was postponed twice, and now there's talk of a plea deal that would keep most of the case sealed. Sealed. Just like the container they found beneath the roses. Just like the truth my family spent years wrapping in silence. I cleared out my father's study last week. Every drawer was a small betrayal. Photos from vacations we never took, receipts from accounts I'd never seen, keys to lockboxes I didn't know existed. But the worst thing wasn't what I found. It was what I didn't. No confessions. No journals. No clues as to why he got involved, why he protected her, why he would do something so deeply unethical for someone who hadn't even married into the family yet. It left me with this unbearable ambiguity, like a riddle with no final line. And maybe that's the hardest part of all of this. Not the betrayal, not the lies, not even the crime. It's the silence. The deliberate gaps in the story. The unanswered questions that echo even louder now that I know they'll never be resolved. I tried to burn the photograph once, the one that started it all, but the flames curled around it like it didn't want to disappear. It sits in a locked drawer now, beneath my bed, beside the recovered emails and court documents and news clippings that make up the new foundation of my reality. It's not justice. It's not closure. But it's what I have. Lately, I've been considering selling the house. Too many memories cling to the walls like mold. Too many shadows flicker across the windows at night. And yet something holds me here. Maybe it's guilt. Maybe it's fear of starting over. Or maybe, deep down, I still believe there's more to find. The contractor who built this place died last year under what the police called unremarkable circumstances, but something about that word haunts me. Unremarkable. Like someone wanted it to seem that way. And when I spoke to one of the original site workers off the record, he told me he'd been told to stay out of the southeast corner of the yard during construction. That corner, the one we never touched, the one where the soil still feels oddly cold even in summer. I haven't gone near it yet. But sometimes I wonder if the story really ended when they took her away. Or if someone else is still waiting just beneath the surface. So maybe this isn't a clean resolution. Maybe it never was meant to be. Some stories don't end with a courtroom verdict or a final monologue. Some of them just linger, humming beneath the quiet life you try to rebuild, reminding you that the truth is rarely whole. It comes in fragments, in moments, in glimpses caught at the edge of memory. And sometimes, no matter how far you dig, the deepest secrets aren't what you uncover. They're what you decide to leave buried.